Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Mill Valley Public Library. I'm Natalie Snoyman, Supervising Archivist of the Lucretia Little History Room here at the library. First, I'd like to thank the library's friends and foundation for supporting this evening's program, and all of my excellent fellow library staff for working late and making this event happen tonight. And just so you're all aware, there is a Friends book sale happening this weekend, so please check your program for more information. I would also like to thank Christopher Caproni for introducing me to tonight's speaker. I'm thrilled to have you all here for this special after-hours program featuring Ken Yager, legendary climber, conservationist, and one of Yosemite's most dedicated stewards. As a climber and national park lover, I know firsthand how these places can shape and inspire us. And as an archivist, I have a deep appreciation for those who work to preserve history, especially when that history is as rich and significant as Yosemite's. Climbing has been an essential part of Yosemite's story for generations, shaping the culture, community, and legacy of the park. And Ken has played a crucial role in ensuring these stories are not lost to time or indifference. Ken has spent more than 5 decades climbing in Yosemite, pioneering bold ascents there and beyond. But just as impressive as his climbing achievements is his unwavering dedication to preserving Yosemite's history and environment. As the founder of Yosemite Facelift, the largest volunteer cleanup event in any national park, Ken has mobilized thousands to help keep Yosemite pristine. Through his work with the Yosemite Climbing Association, he has collected and safeguarded invaluable artifacts and photographs that document the park's vibrant climbing culture. His passion for this history culminated in the creation of the Yosemite Climbing Museum, a one-of-a-kind institution dedicated to telling the story of Yosemite's legendary climbing community and its profound impact on the sport worldwide. Having Ken here tonight is truly special. His stories, insights, and firsthand experiences offer a rare glimpse into the past, present, and future of Yosemite. At a time when our national parks face increasing challenges, from environmental threats to budget cuts and reduced staffing, his work reminds us of the importance of stewardship, advocacy, and staying vigilant to protect these spaces for future generations. So tonight, we invite you to immerse yourself in Yosemite's history, hear from one of its greatest stewards, and leave inspired to protect the places that have given so much to us. Please join me in welcoming Ken Yager.
Gibbons are considered lesser apes. They're not monkeys. They're part of the ape family and are classified as lesser apes because they are smaller than the great apes, exactly how I felt. I got interested in climbing when I lived in France. I went to a French public school. My grandmother put me in a school in Aix-en-Provence. I didn't know a single word of French, and by the end I was pretty fluent. I had to be. But while I was there, my grandmother and I did a little boat ride from Cassis around the coast on the Mediterranean there, and I saw this climbing area called La Cassis, and it's a limestone area over the ocean, and you know what? There were grown-ups up there climbing, and they had ropes and everything. I had no idea that anybody did this. I love climbing things. I didn't need ropes. I climbed buildings, trees, whatever I could. Not too big of rocks, but the idea intrigued me. And so in 1971, so I was 12 years old, I came back to the States, and I lived in Davis. I'm sure everybody, you guys all know where Davis is. My father's a physics professor there, and I had the opportunity to go with him and one of the physics professors there to try climbing, and I was so excited. I did so well that the second time I went, I climbed at Lover's Leap, did a 2-pitch climb, and I kind of hooked in with all the professors at UC Davis that climbed. Well, I figured out pretty quickly, I'll step back for a second. 71 is when the transition from pitons to stoppers and hexes. In other words, from gear that we hammered in, we were damaging the rocks, and now we were hand placing gear, or trying to. Well, the people I was climbing with were used to the old gear, and I got to learn with the new gear, so I understood it. And they let me lead, okay? Third time climbing, I led my first multi-pitch climb, 5-4, the one I did the week before on Lover's Leap, and I was an equal leader. Now, you have to imagine, I'm a 12-year-old kid with stoppers with this gear. These guys didn't understand. They're professors. We're told they're really smart, but they're not as smart as they think they are. And we had hip belays back then. We didn't have devices. So, I mean, it was a whole different world. As I mentioned, I was kind of a bold kid. I mean, like I said, I thought I was going to die. So I would have made a good cat burglar, or a lot of my friends unfortunately committed suicide or got into drugs. Climbing gave me a focus and kept me so focused like you wouldn't believe. So I got into it real heavily, and that's probably why, I mean, I loved it. It was the first activity I had where I felt really good about myself, and that, anyway, it gave a lot to me, and that's kind of explains a lot of what I do, which you'll learn about later. So here's some of the climbs I did as a 13-year-old, 14-year-old. That's me leading, yeah. That's Corrugation Corner, 5'8". I think I led my first 5'9" at 14 years old, the line up there. There's me sitting up high on there, belaying somebody, I think, or getting ready to. So I'd been climbing for about a year all around Sacramento area, Davis area, and then I read every book I could. We had 2 libraries, so I read every mountaineering book. I thought I read The White Spider. How many of you read that? About the North Face of the Yager. Oh, I was going to be a mountaineer after that. So I climbed Lover's Leap once in the winter with about 4 feet of snow, for training as a little kid with my stepfather. It took us an hour to get to the base. Lover's Leap faces north, so it doesn't get any sun. Stupid. But I climbed the first pitch. It's all covered in ice. I just free climbed it, made it, and I couldn't feel my hands. They were so painful. My stepfather had to take over. He was another professor, and he led to the top. But we climbed it in the winter, and I decided, you can have the mountaineering. I'm going to stick to warm rock climbing. It's a lot more. So while reading every book in both the libraries, I also hung out at a place called Alpine Products, which was the local mountaineering shop. And I pestered the people working there. I read every magazine book I could in there. I was thirsting for any knowledge. And I heard about this place called Yosemite in El Capitan. So I did my first climbing trip in 1972. And didn't climb much. I climbed on Glacier Point Apron, real easy climbs, but back then I kind of worked through my grades. I started off real easy, did them all, and then do the next grade. It was very calculated approach because, let's be honest, it was kind of dangerous, so you got to be careful. And anyway, I had a great trip, fell in love with Yosemite. I'm just going, oh my God, look at all these rocks. And on the way out, made my parents stop in El Cap Meadow. And I said, I'll be right back. So I ran up to the base fast as I could. It took a little longer than I thought. Touched the rock to the right of the nose underneath Negative Pinnacle. There's some holes drilled in the rock. I'm not sure what they are, but if you've been up there, you've probably seen them. And I touched it, and I swear I felt like electricity in my hands when I looked up. And I go, I'm going to climb this. And I knew that. 13 years old. How many kids do you know what they're going to do the rest of their life? I mean, that's all I could think about. So I started training in trees, everywhere, local. I learned how to haul. I read every book on wall climbing, Royal Robbins books, all those. Practice hauling, jumaring. I worked for picking almonds and apricots for $1.25 an hour and got my first dynamic line, or lead line, kern mantle line, and a pair of Jumars and a pair of real climbing shoes, EBs. I had hand-me-downs before that, Royal Robbins boots, which don't work so well for free climbing, but that's all I had. And I did Royal Arches in Robin's boots, and with my stepfather, and he kind of hit the wall, and I had to lead the rest of it, and we barely made it down. He had problems with dehydration a lot when we went climbing. But it was quite an adventure, and it was back when what was called the Rotten Log. How many of you have been up the Rotten Log? Anybody? All right. Yeah, the amount of people doing that is declining. That got pushed off in 1986 by Dave Schultz. When this climb was first done by Morgan Harris and W. Kenneth Davis, and I forget the third person's name, but they climbed it in 1936. This was the first climb they did that wasn't to an actual summit, just climbed the wall. So it was a climb for climbing itself. I was lucky enough to meet Morgan Harris that did the first descent. And they called it the Rotten Log back then. And when I did it, I think it was 1973, it was wiggly and rotten, really rotten then. But back to Morgan Harris. He lived he was a student in Berkeley, I believe. And his first 2 attempts on it, he rode his bike all the way to Yosemite. He's a college student. And so he rode his bike, and then on the second trip, after his second try, he didn't make it. On the way back, he actually got heat stroke and ended in the hospital. So on the third and final try, when they actually got to the summit, he rode a car. It was a 6-hour trip back then from the Bay Area. It was, a lot harder to get there. Anyway, here's a picture of my stepfather. He was a chemical engineering professor at UC Davis. And we tried doing some overnight climbing in preparation because I wanted to climb El Cap. We never made any of them, but we tried 3 or 4 of them. But each time you try, you learn a lot. I mean, you won't learn anything if you don't try. And there's no such thing as failure if you try, in the way I look at it. I guess if you kill yourself, that would, but that might count. But other than that, you gotta try it. Otherwise, you're giving up ahead of time. That's the way I look at things in life. So, gets me in trouble sometimes. This is what he was looking at, and that's me up there. And I think I'm rappelling off or something after fixing a rope. And then I got in a little trouble when I was in high school because unfortunately, I quit, or I cut school Fridays and Mondays for 2 years before they caught me. So my dad was so upset. He told me that I had to make up all the homework, and I go, no way. I said I aced all the tests. I showed up for the tests, got straight A's. I just didn't do the homework, and it's 2 years worth. I can never do it. He goes, you're not going climbing this weekend then until you do all the homework. And finally, I just told him, it's not entirely my fault. I mean, it took them 2 years to catch me. Don't you think they should be partly responsible for this? And he knew right then and there I was a climber. And I think he gave up at that point. But it's kind of funny because my parents both divorced and remarried. And it was the professors and the academics loved what I was doing and understood it. And it was my mom that wasn't, that was worried about my lifestyle. But I got my driver's license at 16. I picked up my first hitchhiker. It was this guy. This is, it was the day after I got it at Lover's Leap. And he introduced me to himself. At first, I was like, oh, crap. He looks scary. And my parents told me not to, but he was at Lover's Leap. I was just getting ready to get on the highway, and I felt sorry for him. And he introduced himself. It's Warren Harding, for those of you who don't know who he is, first person to climb El Capitan. So I'm kind of Forrest Gump-like in a lot of ways, as you'll find out. It's not my fault, I swear. But I couldn't have been happier. He gave me $20. I put gas in it. And I gave him a ride to his mom's house in West Sacramento. And there were 2 beached, non-operative Corvettes in front on the lawn. And I met his mom, she made dinner, and we started climbing together. And that's a whole nother slideshow. But anyway, I'm gonna move on. So I actually did some first descents with him and stuff, and also tried one on the Forbidden Wall with him. First time I drank in a bar, I was 16 in Yosemite. And I think we spent $140 that night, the three of us, mostly Warren's. He bought wine for everybody, but that was $1.40 a crap, I think. I'd never been so sick in my life. The next day, I had to carry a pack up, and I was throwing up all the way up the trail. It was horrible. I don't think I drank again for a couple of years. Well, maybe not. Yeah, except with him. So at 17 years old, I decided, I was done, or I had the, or whatever it was, equivalency high school. I had one teacher that she hated me, and she would always flunk me. So I was never going to graduate English. She was the only teacher, so I just left school. And my dad dropped me off in Yosemite on December 6, 1976. And I was 17, I wanted to climb El Cap. So this is middle of the winter, and it was called Sunnyside Campground then, but we always called it Camp 4. This is the original Camp 4 sign. I'm gonna double check that it's up there. So we always called it Camp 4. And I met some of my best friends that first year. I moved there, I was 17, kind of off by myself. There was the Stone Masters, the big apes. They were down on the other end, and they were the rescue team. And then there were a few ragtag climbers, and one of them, the only one that was interested in going on El Capitan, was this guy, and his name's Mike Corbett. And I wasn't even there a week before we made plans to go try El Cap, and we did. We didn't make it that far. We spent 2 nights on it. I mean, it was sort of lame. It's the shortest days of the year, middle of the winter, right? But it was a drought here, but I was so excited I didn't care. And this is a picture I took of El Cap, which I really like. And I think I already showed this one once, but that's all right. So we failed miserably. We had short ropes, almost died, and realized we had to do some other, overnight climbs first rather than 3 or 4 night climb. And but something happened on December 9th, 1976 that kind of changed the next few months' course. And some locals were up there on a ski trip, and they found this airplane wing, that Forrest Gump, right? So anyway, they reported it. They got the numbers off of it. And apparently the DEA was waiting for it in Reno, and it never showed up. So, of course, they were very interested in finding this plane. And some newspaper articles came out. A lot of this stuff, I've got pictures here that haven't been shown or very few times. So this is you guys are kind of lucky. I've been doing a lot of research and gathering stuff. And they found the plane wreck. And lo and behold, they estimated it had about 3,500 pounds of marijuana in it from Mexico. And there it is on February 2nd, 1977. What makes this kind of interesting is it's the day before my birthday, and I'm about to turn 18 years old. Suddenly, I'm an adult and could get in a lot of trouble, right? And that comes later. But, well, I was lucky. But it came to mind. Anyway, so the Rangers, in their infinite wisdom, decided to leave it. They got some of it, and they left it up there and decided to keep it secret until the springtime. And that's a major part of this story. So they suspended the search, and they said, it'll be okay, nobody will know, and we'll see in a minute. A few more details on this airplane. Here's the last picture of it before its last paint job. And, whoa, here's the history of the ownership. Whoa. So, in other words, that person, those Red River Ranch, I guess they owned it when it crashed. There is going to be a documentary they're working on that I've been helping with this. It's the husband of the Bridgerton producers doing it in England, and so I'm pretty sure they're going to do a good job, and she might do a movie on it. It's kind of a hot topic now, this whole subject. Now, here's an interesting thing. A lot of times they misidentified the airplane. It's actually, they called it a Lockheed Lodestar, but it's actually 2 airplanes in one. It's modified. And here's the specs. So they modified a Lockheed Lodestar. I think they took the fuselage, I could be wrong on which way it is, and took the wings off the PV-1 Ventura, which was a Canadian plane. And check out the cruising speed differences, 197, 170, 338. 338, that sounds like a drug plane to me. That's pretty fast, just to cruise. And anyway, they hit a tree, that wing fell off, they went about a mile and a half, and they landed in Lower Merced Pass Lake. So this is a sign they put up on the trails to keep us out. I didn't see it because, I don't know, it was dark or something. But I don't know. So anyway, this is what it looked like. The nose cone sticking out of the lake. I'm going to explain what I mean, I could smell airplane fuel. It was kind of spooky. You knew there were, some deceased people around. You don't know where. And there's wreckage on the side of the lake. But I've got some pictures here from when the Rangers were up there. Turns out anybody can get them. And here they are. And so this would be around in February sometime. And then they got snowed on. And then here's some more pictures. They brought chainsaws up there and divers. Initially, they were looking for, bodies. Now, all the bales were floating around on the lake, and then the ice formed over them. By the time I got up there, I had to dig through 3 feet of ice. And it was cold, wet. I'll talk about that more in a minute. There's the chainsaws. Pretty wild. Any of you ever seen pictures of the airplane crash? A lot of people don't believe it happened, but it did. One problem with it, the bales that were floating closer to the airplane tended to absorb more airplane fuel, so it had a little bit of a reputation on the outside of the bag. It would flame up sometimes, and you'll hear about it. Or it was kind of a common problem. I didn't like it very much. You can see all the bales that they emptied in the background there, the burlap sacks. One I found was 27 kilos. It was this tall on me, and 4 of us carried it out. It was soaking wet. See the tools there to go through the ice. Now, by the time we got up there, the ice was about 3-4 times thicker than what it is here. This is still fairly thin. And there's a diver. Glad I don't have that job. Pretty wild, huh? When you think about it. They found the people in the spring, and they were in their seats still. There's 2 of them, pilot, co-pilot. I met their best friend. He was working on a book and stuff, so this is how I was able to get a lot of this information from the other side. I never brought a camera, and the reason why, when I was up there, my mom was visiting with all my brothers, stepsisters, and stepfather and everything. I told him I was going to go climb Mount Star King. I might have to spend the night, but I'll be back in the morning. So I went in and out in 22 hours, didn't bring any food. I had a sleeping bag and tennis shoes and a down jacket and no headlamp. And I made it in and out for breakfast the next morning after dropping it off. I'm sure I smelled like marijuana and fuel. It was pretty heavy. You had icicles going down, freezing on the pack. Your back's wet. I waded through rivers and stuff. It was pretty burly, but quite an adventure. But I will say that's only half the adventure, because now you got a bunch of wet weed in your tent with no car in Yosemite, and what do you do with it? Everybody's got some, but that's a whole nother story. Like fear and loathing. I mean, it's gnarly. They're bringing it down. That's customs, helicopter there, and evidence. And then the climbers started going up there. And they were had a different viewpoint, a little happier. Celebrating somewhat. They're packing it up. But you can tell there's even more ice there. And that's what a bale looks like once you open it up. And 3,500 pounds. Now to find mine, the first one when I got up there, I'll tell this story, is we got up there, I dug a hole, and we got through the ice, found nothing. It was kind of like guess and by golly, right? And there were holes all over the place because there had been other people up there. So it was like a little gold rush. No other people up there. It was cold and windy. And after the first hole, I got this idea. I ran back to the shore, and I got some fuel line, bent it in an L shape, and I stuck it under the hole and poked around about 10 feet, and then I measured it out, dug down, and I'm like, oh, God, I hope it's not a body. And it was a bale. So my second hole, I found a bale, and we loaded up and got out of there. Now, as I was leaving, some other group of people came up, and one of them carried an ice bar, one of those 20-pound ice bars. I mean, this is like 12, 14 miles up there. You know, it was gnarly. And anyway, I watched them. We just packed up our packs, and we're getting ready to go out. And they break through the ice, and he drops it right to the bottom of the lake. And I'm like, ooh, bummer, dude. Here, you can have my axe. And so we gave him our axe. And first swipe, it went in the water and out, and then we just hiked out. I don't know what they did. They had no tools, so they probably had to wait for somebody else to get up there. But it was hilarious. And then in the spring, the rangers cleaned up the lake. They got most of it. I ended up with some airplane parts, and I have them in Mariposa if you ever want to see some of them. Yeah. There's the fuselage, and they carted it out. Then after that, I traded some of the pot. I didn't really want anything to do with it. I didn't know anybody or stuff. So I gave it to kind of my high school drug dealer, and he gave me a little money. I didn't really care. I traded some for a car. I had a Volkswagen for $500. And I traded a bunch to this mountaineering shop that I was friends with, to the people that worked there, and I had a full whatever I needed to climb El Cap. I got a hammock. I got everything I needed, and I came back to Yosemite, and I was out of money by then. It was business as usual, so I was living off of cans, collecting cans, which we got a nickel a piece, just like they do in California. But at the time, nobody else did it, so everybody threw their cans away, and I'd make up to upwards of $80 a day just collecting cans for a little bit out of the trash can. So I lived like a king, and that's my friend Grant, and Grant's sister's here. She's over there. That's Robin. Right. And I kind of got kicked out of Camp 4 because I'd been there too long, so I had to move into a cave for a couple of years. It's not this cave. I'm keeping my cave secret because I might need it again. You never know. Then, meanwhile, this is that new hammock I traded some pot for. And I'm modifying it, and I'm getting ready to do some walls and back to climbing again because I still want to climb El Cap. So Mike Corbett and I, we did south base of the column. That was my first real wall. Then we went and did this one. This is called Leaning Tower. This is a Glenn Denny photo, not my photo, by the way. And then in the summer of '77, I went and did a route called the Prow. So this is my third wall, or overnight grade 5. Grade 5 is a 2-day climb, at least one night on the wall. And it was 108 degrees, I remember. And I remember looking down below me there to the left is Mirror Lake, and people are jumping in, splashing, and I was wishing I was down there. We were thirsty. But if I didn't punish me enough, apparently, because the very next day I went up on El Cap, so I did them back to back because I wanted to do El Cap so bad. And we made it this time, and that's me on my first El Cap route. I was having so much fun. Wasn't climbing at my best because I'd broken my ankle, but I taped it up like crazy. And I led all the free pitches and the other, my share of the other stuff. So anyway, I felt really good and strong on it, and I was a much better climber than I realized, even though I was only 18 years old. And then after that success, then we went and tried a route called Horseshoe, Charlie Porter route, and we were trying the second ascent of it. And it was the first time I led an A4 pitch. I took a fall and stuff, but got that out of the way and finished the pitch, and then led the Crux aid pitch or Crux free pitch too. And that's this pitch. And then we decided we kind of chickened out. Part of it was because there was a bunch of water in the crack, and the next pitch looked ugly. And I just led 2 pitches in a row, and I felt like it's not my pitch. But nobody else wanted to do it. So we traversed off and finished on dihedral. But it was pretty memorable. It took us 6 full days. There's a hammock. We're sleeping in hammocks, so you can see another person below me. I mean, I barely had any hair on my lip. I was pretty young. I looked like a little baby. And this is up high on Thanksgiving Ledge. We ran out of water for a day and a half, pretty thirsty. But I'm psyched because I was rooting around in the cave back in there, and I found 2 cans of sardines. And I hate sardines, but they kind of saved us. We did have water stashed on top. When we got to the top, I couldn't find it until the next morning. So we had a thirsty night, but we survived. And then I did a route called a Tangerine Trip, like the 6th ascent. And I don't have any photos from that. So that would have been October or so. And then in December of 77, Mike Corbett and I and one other guy, we did the 6th ascent of the Zodiac. Both the trip and the Zodiac had huge reputations. Supposedly couldn't get rescued or get off that side because it's overhanging. People have since proven that wrong, but at the time it was pretty intense. And the other thing is that those routes had only been done by the apes, the gods, the stone masters, these people. So Mike Corbett and I were the first unknowns to climb these routes, and I am positive that's why they became trade routes after that, because they went, well, if that 18-year-old kid and that 23-year-old hippie can do it, then we can do it. And so they did become very popular, and I think it's partly true. It kind of surprised some people that we made it. And you can see the gear hanging next to me. Hexes, no cams. I'm hip belaying. Don't do it like that anymore. There's a picture I took of Chuck Goldman near the top. And then we thought we had it. I could see the summit. And then, unfortunately, just before this pitch, Chuck Goldman, the guy I took in the red, he dropped all the wide gear for this pitch, and I needed it. We had extra gear. So we're stuck up here near the top, and I had to lead this pitch with hardly anything. And at the end, I couldn't get anything to hold. So I started lie backing because I saw a fixed piece of gear up there. And I risked probably 100-foot plus fall here because the gear was crap below me and I didn't have much. I was stacking 3 pitons together to get anything to hold my weight. And I thought it was going to blow. And I just started lie backing. I had no choice. It was wet. Got up. I got my hand through the sling that's fixed hex up there underneath the roof at the top. And all of a sudden my feet slip because it's all wet. I'm hanging by one arm going, oh my God, I'm trying to clip my rope in and my carabiner, and it was pinching my hand. But I finally made it. And then the rest of the route was pretty uneventful. We got to the top and we threw a haul bag off. You can't do that anymore, but we didn't want to carry it down. And I think the bottom blew out. We learned you had to put a parachute on it, but live and learn, right? We were so lucky. I had a down sleeping bag and we had wool sweaters. In fact, Chuck Goldman had 2 of them, but he dropped one, and I told him he dropped it, but he goes, oh no, I only brought one. I go, I know you did. I found it after the climb. But it started snowing the very day we got off, and it snowed for a month straight. I was so lucky, so lucky. Also during that time, how many of you know this? I threw this in here. This is Jablonski, John Jablonski, the guy that figured out that Midnight Lightning could get climbed, and he's doing like 2nd or 3rd ascent here. It's right around that time. So I just kind of throw that in there. But it's my own photo, too. So he's no longer with us, but he's quite a character in Yosemite history, especially from the 70s. Since it snowed for a month straight, I got bored. I was living in my cave, and I go, this sucks. I can't go climbing. And so I kind of lied and told them I had experience at a ski area, and they believed me. I mean, I'm only 18. Like, how many jobs could I have worked? But they believed me, and I ended up being their best lift operator. And I got into it, and I learned how to ski that year, so it's a lot of fun. And then, so this would have been 77, 78, and then in the spring of 78, I decided to climb Half Dome a little early in the year, and it'd been a big year. And it wasn't quite this snowy getting to the bottom, but it'll give you an idea. And if you look on the left side of Half Dome there, there's this smooth slope with some trees on the right side. Well, I was trying to get down to the base, and I slipped with my haul bag, and dang near went into the canyon there. I mean, I almost died. I slid down about 150 feet. It was real icy. Before that, I'd been kicking steps, and it suddenly got icy, and I was thinking about roping up, and I slipped. And I had about a 150-pound pack on. So I slid down, and I got above a tree and hit it really hard. And there was a tree well, you know, where the snow's melted out. So I was safe there around the tree, and it took my pack off and signaled the two guys up, and Mike Corbett was one of them. And Mike slips, and he's going, save me, save me. And I tried grabbing him, and he yanked me out of the hole because he was going so fast, and so both of us are going. But he had his haul bag on, couldn't maneuver. And I was lucky enough, I just scrambled and pushed him over. We were going down this little gully, hit a tree. I hit it, but he stopped. I kept going. I caught the second to last tree before going into Tenaya Canyon. I had one other option. I could have gone for a little open talus and landed in the rocks. But, I mean, you're going like 60 miles an hour so fast. It was terrifying. I still have nightmares about it. And I had shoulder problems. I recently had it repaired 6 years ago. So anyway, it was a lesson learned. But I didn't have much experience with snow and ice. So, and it dang near killed me. So what I do, I couldn't climb because my shoulder was ruined. So I moved to Mammoth and tried to learn skiing, you know, because at least I could do something fun. And so I moved there in it would have been 79 for that winter, or the tail end of it. And this is where I lived. Anywhere you live there, it costs a lot of money to have housing where they plow. So the cheapest housing is where they don't plow. And this is Alpine Circle. So I had to shovel home every night, get my car home. But this is what it looked like. A lot of work. I'll never live in snow country again, but it's too much work. I had a lot of fun there. I befriended the cat drivers and stuff and asked for a ride to the top. And then I went off the cornices on a Hanselite pad all the way down, and it was a lot of fun. And I got to be a pretty good skier because I got to ski I worked night crew, and I really love powder skiing and going really fast. And then I like the backcountry skiing. This is on the backside it's called Hole in the Wall. If you've skied at Mammoth, you may have skied this, but it's a really unique ski run. You go right through that tunnel and down to the lakes on the backside of Mammoth Mountain. And I got into jumping. I jumped 300 feet once, and then I go, no more. I was so out of control I could have died. I went over about 40 trees. And also, yeah, I took a bad spill one day and broke my sternum and my neck, which bothered me for 40 years. My neck is actually plated now. And it feels good. I'm back to it. And this is jumping off the cornice at MJB's in Mammoth. Then I got into racing a little bit because I tried everything I could there. I sucked at racing. You notice I doing a whole 360. I never jumped off one of these speed bumps before. But the other guy is way behind me. I fell, and I still beat him, so it was cool. I used to get a lot of shit, too, for not having ski pants. I'm in Levi's and stuff, and people hated it when somebody in Levi's beats them. So I'd rather spend the money on climbing gear or skis, you know. I had about 8 pairs of skis. So, and then I did a lot of backcountry skiing, including I I think we were the first ones to ski Mount Banner, we skied Mount Dade, a bunch of them. The first picture on my show was Ellery Lake, and I skied Ellery Bowl with 100-foot cornices, and we had to traverse in over rocks and stuff. And I hung out with some pretty good skiers and just did my best to keep up. Another thing I noticed after moving there, there's rock everywhere. I'd heard about the buttermilk, so of course I went out there. And in fact, this particular problem, you go out there now, it does not have green bushes in the top of that rock. It's long gone. But this isn't during the heyday of the 1980 or so, when buttermilks was still getting discovered. And I climbed with this guy by the name of Dale Bard, who did some of the hardest boulder problems out there, and they're kind of the initial test pieces for hard bouldering at that area. And buttermilks has become a world-class bouldering area. People come from all over the world to climb there, and it's beautiful. Even if you're not a climber, it's a great place to go and hang out and hike around because there's all these beautiful rocks with the Sierras there. And then I did some, high Sierra climbing, not a lot, but one trip I went up to the Palisades. We skied some of that stuff, Contact Pass, U-Notch and stuff. So, but I also did a trip with my friend Arid Allen, and we camped the only time I camped at 14,000 feet in the Sierras, and I took this picture, but we had hiked all day through this stuff, and it was like 3 feet deep. It took us all day to go about 2 or 3 miles. And that's a view of Mount Sill right there in the sunset. And, but what I noticed is most of the climbers at that time in that area, they were all into the alpine climbing. Remember, I had a bad experience climbing, in the cold. So I was more interested in the stuff down in the desert. And there's all this volcanic rock that nobody had ever climbed before. So I just had so much fun for 5 years discovering areas with my buddy Grant. And we would go and do all the first ascents. And these are some of the routes that I did. And incredible climbing. Probably did over 100, 150 routes. First ascents there, or maybe 200. I never really counted, but it's hundreds. And this is a place called Wild Cow Canyon, which I don't believe is in any guidebook, but it could be by now. This is Dexter Canyon, beautiful, 2-pitch, 300-foot volcanic cliffs with these great cracks, some of the best climbing I've ever done. Here's a place called the Stumps, and anyway, I'm leading there. Then here's another route I did with, I think that's Grant there leading and me down below. And we called this one Bowling for Keeps because it was like bowling ball holds, but there's no protection. So if Grant falls there, he's going to the ground. But you had to start way left behind that tree and traverse to the crack. Once you got to the crack, you can get gear in and make it safe. This is at Benton. It's out by Crowley Lake, on the east side of Crowley Lake. Beautiful place. Lots of petroglyphs and stuff out there, and the Indians, or the natives, Americans and stuff, spent a lot of time out there. I forget which tribe it is, but beautiful area. But then I did all these great adventures over there, but I kind of got tired of the short climbing and wanted to climb something long again. So 1985, I moved back to Yosemite full-time. I was climbing there in the summers, even when I lived in Mammoth, but I wanted to spend more time there. And so I moved back to Yosemite full-time, 1985. And then, of course, I had to climb El Cap again. And so I did it with Donnie Reed. And he wrote one of the guidebooks, pretty well-known guy, well-known in the climbing community. He also did the guidebook and worked for the mountaineering school. Really good friend of mine. A little higher up. And then I really enjoyed doing first ascents on the east side, and I suddenly realized there's still a lot of unclimbed stuff in Yosemite, so I started kind of looking for it and exploring. And this is one of the routes I did that they used it on the advertisement of the show. This is called Tiger by the Tail, and it took me about 6 months to do it. I tried and tried. I'd go twice a week. I'd go and take 2 falls on it, come back, and I eventually did it. Probably the most rad route I've ever been on in my life is this next one, and it's called Karma, and it's on the south face of Half Dome, which is probably one of the most dangerous places to climb in Yosemite because of weather. Many good climbers have been rescued on this face, and we did a route that traverses for 900 feet with overhanging wall underneath, so the only way to get down is back the way you came. You'd have to climb back down, and there were places on it where you could take 100-footers all over it. It was crazy. And it ended up being one of the most difficult routes at that time in the 1980s. And just 2 years ago, it finally got its second ascent, and there's bolts added to it, so it's a lot safer now. And it got freed at 513D. But I met the guy, he's from Austria, and he was really impressed by this. He couldn't believe that we went up there from the ground and did this route. So it was really cool to hear that from him, and it was terrifying. It went up and right, and I just followed. I was invited because of my big Wallace experience, and we did this with Dave Schultz, who was probably the top climber at that time. And I could have taken falls, but the problem was I had knee surgery. My left knee had 2 screws in it. It was huge, and I couldn't bend it very well, but it worked out because it was all up and right, so I could pinch it and drag this left leg up and high step with this leg. I shouldn't have been up there, but I made it. I didn't fall. I did have a scrape on my nose because you feel like you're going to go over backwards, and I'm turning my head. And so my nose was hitting the wall the whole time. I think all 3 of us had a little scab on our nose after that route. And that's a view of me down there at the bottom. This was probably the steepest part of it. And recently I got asked, my closest call, and this is one of them. We were about 12 feet apart, and a bunch of giant refrigerator blocks came off, and we just kind of got close to the wall, and they missed us by maybe 1.5 feet, 2 feet. And I've had that experience a few times, and sometimes you can move, but you're kind of attached to the rock. You don't have much movement, so it's terrifying, and they make a lot of noise. The bigger the rock, the lower the pitch. It'll be like, it sounds like a jet. It's terrifying. Even a little rock sounds huge, but it doesn't take much if it's going 1,000 feet. Now this is up higher. This is about 800-900 feet up this dike system, or diagonally dike. And I think it took 37 years before it got repeated. This is another area just outside the park in Sonora area that I developed, and went up there and hang hooks off of it and drill bolts on these blocks that I thought were going to come out, but it ended up being really good rock. And I'm going to go climbing there tomorrow, and the next day. I'm looking forward to it. And remember this guy, Mike Corbett. He was my first big wall partner, did El Cap. We climbed El Cap maybe 7 times. But he took Mark Wellman, the first paraplegic, in 1989 up El Capitan. Huge, huge achievement. And this is him carrying him up there. Of course, once you get him up, he gets up there, and he's got to come down, and that's hard. But this guy inspired a lot of people. 2 years later, they climbed Half Dome. Mark's the only paraplegic that's climbed Half Dome so far. Timmy O'Neill's brother, Sean O'Neill, tried it. Probably would have made it, but he had some equipment failures or something, and they didn't make it. Impressive. So it made worldwide news. In fact, these are the only climbers I know of, and maybe Alex Honnold or Caldwell got invited to the White House, but for the longest time, these were the only guys that ever went to the White House, and shortly after, Bush signed the American Disability Act. So they had a huge influence in that. So, making curbs and it easier for people to access buildings. A large part had to do with this climb. It's not all of it, but it kind of inspired him to sign it. And so probably one of the best things I think that Bush did for us. So anyway, it's pretty cool. Mike and I always had this passion that we loved climbing. So we put all our climbing gear to together to make a sort of a history of rock climbing exhibit, because the equipment was changing. At this point, they had cams and all this, and sticky soled shoes, excuse me. And so it was changing so quickly, we decided to pool our old stuff together and do a little museum exhibit or display. And that was kind of our goal. And then in 1992, John Salathe passed. And I called Climbing Magazine and said, "Hey, you guys are doing an obituary on him, right? I'd like to learn more about him." And they go, "Who?" And I go, "Are you kidding me? It's the grandfather of big wall climbing." And so they didn't have anybody to write it. They weren't going to do it. So I contacted John Flynn, who wrote for the Examiner at that time, asked him to write an obituary. And I bought a video camera for, $3,000. And I cold called everybody I knew that I could think of after searching for their numbers in the white pages that climbed with John Salathe. And I just cold called them and told them what I wanted to do, and they invited me into their homes. It was amazing. So we went and interviewed all these people. So I got to meet all my heroes that I read about when I was 12. I mean, I met 1930s climbers, Marjorie Bridge Farquhar, Doris Corcoran, who married Richard Leonard. I met Richard Leonard. I met Morgan Harris, Mildred Bennett. Mildred's son's in the office here, or he's here somewhere tonight. I saw him earlier. There he is. And especially Mildred, she introduced me to everybody. And I not only got to meet my heroes, but become friends with them. So we interviewed them, learned about John Salathe, and somehow they found out that we had this little collection. So they went into their closets, garage, and they go, "Here, we're giving you this." And I go, "No, really?" They go, "Yeah." And I was like, this can't be. These, they gave me the history of early Yosemite climbing. I didn't realize it was such a curse, because I've been busy ever since trying to raise money. And, I've donated, instead of invested in IRAs, I would put it into this museum project, 25 years. Well, it's been 33 years now. And Richard Leonard actually gave us the notebooks from Higher and Lower Cathedral Spire. And this is one of the pictures I took out of it. This is the very first rock climb ever done in Yosemite Valley with a rope climbing. This is the Sierra Club. And they practiced jumping off of rocks in the Berkeley Hills for a year and a half, catching each other with hemp ropes. And I imagine somebody probably got a sprained ankle at the very least. But we have pictures in the museum if you ever come up to Mariposa, and I can show you this stuff. But this is from the very first climbing trip, which was Labor Day weekend in 1933. I also have the list of the climbers, 21 climbers that signed up for this trip and came out. And of the 21, 7 were female. People don't realize females have been involved in Yosemite climbing since the very first day, and I'm making sure that people know that. Took 3 tries, but they made it to the top of Higher Cathedral Spire in 1934. Took them 3 tries to make it to the top of Lower Cathedral Spire in the same year. Then Mike and I did our first exhibit, got our first press, so I guess this was 1993. And we were kind of on our way, and we did a show in San Francisco, Great Outdoor Adventure Fair, and we were making really good progress. But then something happened. You start having kids, what happens? You got to get a job, right? A real job and all that. Up till now, I kind of slid a little job here and there. And I tried to keep it that way. One of the jobs I did, I got hired to pull eggs out of a peregrine nest on El Cap. And it was pretty awesome. So this would have been 1986. And they don't like it much when you get close to their nest. It's really big. I could have slept in it. And we went up to the left side of El Cap tree, which fell off last year, so you can't see that anymore. But we roughly level with it, and then traversed out to the left to this eyrie. And we brought a baby in a cage on a backpack, and you'd feed it with this little mother, well, it sounds bad, puppet. Got to be careful how I say that. But you would feed it meat, and it would go, you know, and I was just laughing because I go, this is ridiculous. You want us to go up, take an egg out of the nest, and put this baby in there. It'll never work, but it did. There's 17 nesting pairs now in the park, and it was a big story this year. So this is what they look like when they dive bomb you. This is why it was so terrifying. They're the fastest animal in the world, and they're flying at us because they're mad because we're in their nest. They really don't like it. They would go up about 150, 200 feet up, do a little wing over. If you're a pilot, you probably know that, where they go over, and they would pull their legs in and their wings back, just like that, and they would dive bomb, and then they'd flare out right by my neck. Did not like, I could feel them going by, and you'd hear them, and you're just cowering there going, oh God, they could kill me. So we set up fireman style on this horizontal rope, and we took the egg out of the nest. It was Rob Roy Ramey, took it out, put it in a padded little cage or foam box to protect it, and we passed it to the right, fireman style, person to person, and it's clipped into the rope. And then we took this baby, passed it, and it's squawking, and you know, could hear the adults and stuff, so it knew something was up. And then we released it in the nest, and then we got the hell out of there because it was terrifying. And they started feeding it right away. I couldn't believe it. And within 10, 15 minutes, as soon as we were over 100 feet away, they were in the nest, and they thought it was their baby, fortunately, and took care of it. So now there's 17 pairs. Another weird job that I had was working for this movie, Last of the Mohicans, and yeah, I just got paid for a week to do a first ascent above the mist trail to get a certain angle of the Vernal Falls, which they superimposed over the scene where they hide underneath the waterfall. So I worked for a week for about 2 seconds of film, but anyway, it was an interesting experience, and that was 20th Century Fox, I think. And then I worked on this one. This is David Lee Roth on his album, Skyscraper. Yeah, I met him. He was short. And apparently his cameraman's even shorter because the guy looks like he's giant, right? But he's about this tall. And yeah, it was kind of an interesting. I met him. He was carrying this little tiny pack. I didn't even know it was him. And I passed him on the trail with my giant pack. But anyway, he came up later and congratulated me and said, welcome to the team and stuff. But it was kind of cool. We hung out 2 or 3 days. Not really my type of music, but I got to hear all the new stuff he was working on. And it was interesting. And then, okay, so this is Dave Schultz, and they're putting a wig on him. We got hired to do a fall for a movie, and I got hired to be technical advisor with a human experiment. So we were hired to set up a 120-foot fall on the top El Cap for a movie, which at that time was even more difficult or a little crazier than what Rick Sylvester had done for the James Bond movies at that time. He's the only other one that had done this kind of stuff. And so I went for it. And I didn't take the fall, Dave did. There it is. Here, I mean, a full 120-foot fall off the top El Cap. What's kind of interesting is that it was a husband-wife team that were filming the thing, and one of them wouldn't go over the edge, so they taught me how to run the camera. So I did the actual film work for them, and all for $80 a day. I mean, you gotta love it. I mean, I work for next to nothing. And yeah, if you offer me a job of something I like to do, it doesn't cost that much. But if it's something I don't want to do, it's going to cost you a fortune. I'll tell you that. So, but it was hard with the kids and trying to pay for a house and all this stuff to make it on part-time work. So I applied for YMS, the Yosemite Mountaineering School, and they hired me looking like this, believe it or not. I ended up shaving. I did this for about, I think, 12 years. I loved it because I could climb El Cap, and you get to climb whatever you want. Well, it's up to the clients, but you could pick the routes. And so I would probably guide El Cap 3 to 6 times a year for 12 years, so I probably guided it 50 some odd times. And that's me up there on the mirror. And of course, by this time we didn't have to sleep in hammocks, so we had portaledges, which were much more comfortable. And that's what it looks like about 2,500 feet up or so. You can see the road down below, El Cap Bridge, the river. It's amazing up there. If you haven't been up there, it's like parachuting, but you got, it lasts for a long time. So it's even better, in my opinion. I got asked, to do a calendar shoot, and that's what this was. A route called Freestone, which hadn't been done that much. And I kind of looked it up, and I said, sure, I'll do it. I looked it up in the old guidebook, but apparently it was a lot harder in the newer guidebook. And it was kind of terrifying, but I pulled it off. And I love this picture. Kevin Worrell took it and ended up going in a calendar. And this is one Mark Chapman took at the same time. But it was a wild experience because we did it during high water, so at the very bottom, you got spray coming on you, so the rock's a little wet. The cracks are full of grass because there's moisture and the grass keeps growing back, so you're digging it out or trying to get your gear in and stuff. But the main thing that I really noticed was the rock was just vibrating from the waterfall. It's like you feel this power up there, and it's kind of, I don't know, it was like the same thing I felt when I touched El Cap. That place is full of so much power there, spiritual power, and it's an amazing place. This is on El Cap and taken from El Cap. This is the Zodiac, which I'd done before, but I guided it quite a few times. And you can see how those shadows from the haul bags, that lets you know it's an overhanging climb. So the more separation, the steeper the climb. This is, I believe, just at the top of I think it's the nipple pitch, top of the nipple pitch. And this is on the mirror. And then during this whole time, I never gave up on, climbing museum. The problem that we had was the climbers and the rangers or Park Service did not get along. We hated each other. It was horrible. I felt like second-class citizen was there. In the 70s, weren't allowed to take showers, so you had to steal them. And you'd hear the radios, and you go, oh, shit. You'd grab your clothes, and you wouldn't even put them on. You go running in the rocks. But they're scared of the rocks, because that was our home territory. So once you made it to the rocks, you were safe, because the boulder's behind Camp 4. And nowadays, there's a lot of climbers that work for the Park Service. It's a whole different story now. But during that time, there were a lot of very unfit rangers and stuff. So it wasn't that hard. It became kind of a game. It's like, here they come. And you let them get close, and then you take off. So I finally convinced the Park Service to let me do a museum exhibit. So this is the first one. I'd done exhibits in the Mountain Shop and the Ahwahnee Hotel and stuff, but this is the official first Park Service exhibit I did on Yosemite climbing history. Just before it, I'd done a Glenn Denny exhibit to help him with his book. I helped him with this wonderful book of climbing in the 60s. I scanned all the pictures and hooked him up with Patagonia to get that book to happen. And I did an exhibit, and it was so good that they gave me another chance, and they let me curate it and everything, which kind of pissed off some of the Park Service people that were supposed to do that job, but their boss gave it to me. And this is the grand opening. That's the superintendent, Mike Tollison, to the left in the blue shirt there. And it was so popular in 4.5 months, or 3.5 months it might have been, but over 70,000 people came in there. And it was 3 times what they'd ever had in that facility before. It was right by the Indian Museum. It's called the Yosemite Museum. You had to walk through the Indian Museum to get to it. And it was crowded. We couldn't close it, and they couldn't take a lunch. So I would go there on my lunch from my job and fill in so that the docents could eat lunch. It was so popular that it got picked up by the Audrey. And this would have been 2009, I think. And I had $250,000 and real curators and a whole staff. And it's like, dude, this is big time. It's cool. And we did this exhibit, and it was going to travel around the country after this. But unfortunately, that happened to be when the housing dropped. So boom, the money. Anyway, that's been a problem with this whole museum thing, because when the economy gets tough, then it's hard to fund this kind of stuff, because it's, you know, people need money to eat. This is the grand opening. It was so much, it was so much fun. But I was still kind of struggling to get a place and to get the Park Service to really kind of embrace the climbing community. And one year, while working as a climbing guide, I got so fed up with all the toilet paper and trash I was stepping through off the side of the road. It was really bad. You could drive down the road and look pretty clean. There's trash on the side. But if you parked, walked out behind every tree, rock, there's garbage everywhere. You just couldn't see it from the road. Think if you got to go to the bathroom, you're not going to do it where everybody can see you, right? So you have to get off the road to find the stuff. And it was horrible. And so I just decided to get some litter sticks and trash bags, and I grabbed everybody from Camp 4 that I knew, about 120 of us, and we did what we called the Yosemite Facelift. We got about 40 truckloads of this stuff, and I started this event. I trademarked the name, and it's called the Yosemite Facelift. This year will be year number 22. Yeah. Thank you. We have cleaned up over 1.2 million pounds. Unreal. Now, every year, we find anywhere from 13,000, 16,000 pounds a year. So that's about what gets dropped every year. And we're not getting the whole park, but we're getting a good part of it. And we've targeted certain areas, and the park looks a lot better now. And it's also made it, the Park Service is a little more careful now. So a lot of this trash, the heavy stuff, was from construction projects. Most contractors, I worked a lot of them, they get money to set up their yard, you know, to set up their trailer and fencing and all this stuff, and then they get a little money at the end of the contract to remove it. Most of them feel like it's not worth it to remove it, so all the leftover junk and stuff got left there and then covered with pine needles. So we went in, I knew where they were, and we cleaned them up. I didn't blame anybody, but it changed kind of the way things are done up there. So every contractor I worked for, I made sure they cleaned up that yard back to the way it was. And now they all do it, so that's kind of cool. Here's what the facelift, this is kind of the earlier days, but you can see how much trash and stuff. And we do this this year, if you want to join, it'll be September 24th through the 28th, 5 days of cleaning up, and it's for kids, all ages, and you don't have to be super fit or anything. You pick something that you can do, and we all get together and clean up the park. We generally get about 600 people a day for 5 days, up to 3,000 work days. And some are technical climbing cleanups, maybe on ledges below Glacier Point or something like that, or on El Cap. But most of it, we just go out and clean wherever it's needed. I'm hoping that's not my phone, because it's buried in there. But it was, anyway, it's turned into this wonderful event. So we clean up trash all day long. We have schools that come and do field trips. And at the end of the day, we have a drawing. We have to call it a drawing because a raffle is illegal. It's considered gambling, but it is a raffle. I'll say that. And you can only get a ticket if you clean trash. So we do one raffle, one for the kids, one for the adults. Then I dump all the tags, and if you want a chance to win tomorrow, you got to come and clean trash again. And so that's how I get people to repeat. And then I make it fun because I have these evening shows that some of the best climbers or biggest adventurers in the world come and do evening programs. And then at the end, I have some sort of dance, rock and roll band, free food for everybody. So it's quite an event, And the other thing, we often can assist you on camping. I try to get as much free camping as I can, so we organize all that. It's so much work. In fact, every year I go, God, I'm never doing this again. But once it starts, I go, yeah, it's worth it, because it's an unbelievable feeling, and it kind of builds up each day. But if you ever have a chance, I recommend it. It's a lot of fun. And kids are welcome, all ages, whatever. In fact, I love watching the kids. It's awesome. And this is like after one day of picking up stuff. And I utilize the locals and the climbing community, because we explore all over the park and we find this stuff. And so suddenly we dedicate 5 days to cleaning all this stuff up. And it's turned into a big event. This is the raffle, and I have the kids help pass out the raffle tickets, or the prizes rather. And yeah, they love it, and everybody loves it. And right in front of the visitor center, live music. I used to do music on a Saturday out in front of the visitor center. Everybody told me, you'll never be able to do that. Well, I did it twice, because they tell me I can't do something, I try to figure out a way. Then the superintendent told me, nope, can't do it outside anymore. So I talked to the school. A block away is the school. Well, he has no jurisdiction on the school, so I worked out a deal with the school, and I did concerts on the field at the school. So anyway, I'm kind of a pain, I think, but... And then this is one of the evening programs, and they got so big, I got in trouble with the fire marshal, so now I have to set up TVs outside, and we put a lot of people outside, and it's a lot easier. Through the facelift and all this stuff, suddenly the Park Service liked me, and in 2019, this still blows me away, but the 100th anniversary of Yosemite, they asked me to be an ambassador, and yeah, so I'm a Yosemite ambassador. I did ask if it came with diplomatic immunity, but it hasn't. They haven't answered yet. And I had to dress the part sometimes. And I don't really like the uniform that much. I don't look all that happy, but it was kind of uncomfortable. You get special privileges. And sometimes you have to speak to a lot of reporters, and it's kind of scary. This is actually when Tommy Caldwell and Kevin Jorgensen did the Don Wall. They asked me to introduce them. That's only about a quarter of the reporters, and it was kind of terrifying. And then get to hang out with your heroes. I mean, that's Royal Robbins on the right and Tom Frost on the left. Both these guys were mentors of mine. I was lucky I had 5 mentors. I had my stepfather, Steve Whitaker, then Gene Drake, who wrote the first guidebook to Lover's Leap, and then Warren Harding. Maybe he wasn't the greatest mentor, but I liked it. And then Tom Frost and Royal Robbins. Royal Robbins and I, oddly enough, shared the same birthday, so I used to tease him and call him up, and I go, hey, happy birthday, Royal. And he'd go, thanks, kid. How did you know? And I'd tell him it's easy for me to remember. After about 7 years of this, I died laughing and kind of explained it to him. But now his daughter and his wife actually wished me a happy birthday. So it's kind of cool. But I have all these weird ties. And then got to meet this guy. Didn't get to talk to him, but I got to shake his hand. So big highlight of my life. And my daughter did too, and we vowed not to wash our hands for a year. And then they named a sandwich after me at a show. That was kind of funny. It was a good sandwich. And the paparazzi, man, they're out of control. But this is when Wellman did and Corbett, they did the Half Dome climb and stuff. So I'm just having fun right now myself. But I started a program called Ask a Climber. It's an interpretive program, and the idea was I used to get kind of mad at some of the climbers that, tourists would come up or people that didn't know anything about climbing, and they would ask real questions because they didn't know. And climbers sometimes can be kind of mean, and they tell me, yeah, we throw grappling hooks and go up or whatever. They just feed them a bunch of baloney. And that always bothered me. So I set up a program where we have somebody that has climbed El Cap before, set up these telescopes on climbers on El Cap, and you can come and watch them and ask questions and actually get real information. And it's kind of brought the climbing community and the Park Service together. And it also created a lot of jobs. There's a climbing management team and climbing stewards and stuff like that. There's quite a climbing program now, which is good because we can work with them, and we can keep our climbing areas open, because if there's people in the Park Service that don't understand that stuff, they could stop climbing at any time. This program, by the way, it's open, I think it's 4 hours a day, noon to 4 in the summer, but the last few years they've been getting 600 people a day in those 4 hours. It's the most popular program up there. So how about that? I mean, that's pretty cool. And then it would be 3 years ago, I believe, so 2022. I just finished an exhibit. Unfortunately, it was during COVID, but a permanent exhibit in what was then the visitor center. So the Park Service finally caved, and to get rid of me, I think. And they let me do an exhibit, and I raised the money for it, and this is it. It's in what's called the Exploration Center. And I just got another little section of wall I'm going to add on to it. I've got meetings next week about that. And that's another view of it. Now, simultaneously, see, I have over 10,000 artifacts. I got the whole history of Yosemite climbing in Mariposa. It'll blow you away. Simultaneously, while building this one, I built one in Mariposa. But I could have done one 20 years ago, 30 years ago in Mariposa. But if I had one outside the park, they wouldn't give me space inside the park. And I was very determined for them to recognize the climbing community as a legitimate part of Yosemite history. In the old days, in the 30s, 40s, they all knew each other. Jules Eichhorn, for example, who was on the first trip to Yosemite and climbed higher and lower Cathedral Spire's first ascents to get the pitons for those climbs, he washed prints in Ansel Adams' bathtub in the Berkeley Hills, for example. So, in other words, the climbers and everybody was there. It was a small community. They were all friends. And it changed in large part due to the riots. I think it was 1969. And there were riots. And suddenly in the 70s, because these riots scared they were interpretive rangers before that, suddenly they had LEO. They carried guns, okay? And this was a new thing. And then who looked like these hippies that they kicked out and nearly rioted in Stoneman Meadows? They looked like climbers. I mean, we all looked the same, but we were climbers and fit, but we had long hair and beards and looked like, all the other people. So, yeah. So this is the Mariposa one that I built simultaneously. It's a little more crowded. We don't have a big space. And that's an older exhibit. And then about a year ago, I decided to remodel it. We closed it for 70 days. I had 70 days to open it up and then put the new exhibit in. And I should mention, too, after opening, 2 days after we celebrated the opening of the exhibit in the park, we already had this exhibit I showed you in the last photo. Mike Corbett unfortunately passed 2 days later after we celebrated our lifelong, goal. And the strange thing about it is, for some reason, we had a falling out for 25 years. And then I asked him to be involved again and back, and we became best friends again for a year. And then he passed, but I'm really glad that I asked him to come back. This is the outside of the Yosemite, or the Mariposa facility. It's right by the four-way stop in Mariposa. And I dug out this back hillside. You can kind of see some rock-looking things on the left side. Here's another view of it. I made benches. I dug it out and used concrete and mortar. I get these weird ideas sometimes, and I was dreaming about it, and I finally just decided to do it. And I put a little waterfall in there, and it's nice little, recognize that waterfall. It's all from memory. And then we redid the exhibit. And I like it a lot better. It's much more open. We're open 6 days a week, and Tuesday through Sunday, we're all closed on Mondays. Picture of our retail shop. And anyways, right now, you guys probably heard, about the stuff going on in Yosemite and everything going on, and I'll let you know I'm taking kind of a hard stance. I just called our congressman a coward today on my last interview because he wouldn't show up to our... I might get some flack, but I can't really, take it anymore. And so if you like what we're doing, we're always looking for help, donations, or whatever. We rely totally. We're 501c3. I've never paid myself, but I do have employees that we need. And if you guys are interested, we're going to do a little Q&A after this, but afterwards I'll be glad to talk to people one-on-one. I got museum brochures over there and some other things if you want to take a look. And that's the end of my show here, but I'd like to take some questions. And thank you very much.
This isn't about rock climbing, but can you explain with the eagles why you were putting baby eagles in and falcons taking them away?
Yeah, good question. Why were we taking the peregrine falcon eggs out? At that time, they weren't hatching naturally because the eggshells were really thin from eating migratory birds. Now, the migratory birds were picking up minute traces of DDT in Mexico and then bringing it back. And since that's what they fed exclusively off of, it was affecting the eggshells, and they weren't hatching naturally. And so they had to be hatched in a laboratory. So thanks for asking that question. I should have mentioned that. Anybody else? Way in the back. I'm going to run. This is faster.
Well, first of all, Ken, thank you for sharing your wild and crazy and inspiring stories. So, do you know why you do it?
Why do I do it? I don't know. It's a good question. Why do I climb, or why do I do what I do? Why do I climb? Good question. I felt like, first of all, it felt very natural to me. I think most humans like to go to a top of a hill to get a view, so that might be part of it. I also feel like it gives me a lot of peace being outdoors, and mental health is good. Anytime I feel stressed or whatever, if I go out, a little time in the mountains fixes that for me. Maybe not for everybody, but I think we all have those activities that give us peace and comfort. And also, I think it was, I think when I was a kid, I kind of felt a little inferior at times, or, probably feelings that everybody has. And I felt like it was the one thing where I got a lot of respect from adults. I mean, my friends at that time were 2 or 3 times as old as I was. And, I felt like, anyway, it gave me a lot. And I talked about a little bit that, I thought I was going to die in Vietnam, and I wasn't sure I could shoot somebody. I wasn't sure if I'd just stand there and get shot. I never really could figure that out. But I also, as to why I do what I do, I feel if you have a skill, if you're a musician and you play really well and people enjoy your music, you got an obligation to share it with them, or you should. And I feel like I'm in this unique position from living in Yosemite all this time, and these pioneers entrusting me with their stuff, that it's my obligation to work on it, just because this history would get lost otherwise. So that's why I do that part of it. And I love Yosemite National Park, so I'll always do what I can to protect that. My initial reaction after hearing of what's going on this year was to go up and clean the park. And I think that's the wrong approach, because they'll say, hey, look, we got volunteers that'll clean the park every day. We don't need to hire them. So I'm going to give it some tough love this year, let it go, and I'm going to go really big on the facelift this year. If you guys want to help me, what you could do, if you see a service in the park that's not getting done because of that job layoff, take a picture, send it to me, put it on social media. Let's let them know we're missing these Park Service employees. They are already 20% short before all this crap happened. And I happen to hear there's going to be another layoff. They're trying to tank the Park Service, and in my opinion, they're trying to privatize it. So once it's privatized, somebody like me, 17 years old with a couple $100, no car, a pack that wants, climb El Cap or go hike in there, they're not going to be able to do it. They're going to raise the prices. Campgrounds will be too much. That's why it's important to stand up and fight for this. The only other thing I can do is, stand in front of the gate and let people know, but we have to stand up if we want to save these places, and they're going after the easy parks first in their eyes. They're the ones maybe we don't visit so much, but there are people that visit them, and they're going to, they're already talking about getting the lumber out of it, but there's oil, there's minerals, and all that, and these places, once they're ruined forever. And I also feel very strongly that national parks are the one place that both sides can come together. We all love the national parks, and we need something that we can kind of agree on and love together, and that's where national parks come in.
Thank you for your dedication to the national parks. I have a suggestion, and I agree with you. I think we need to speak up. In the California delegation, we've got a lot of support in Congress for the national parks and for our state parks and others. But I think most of us have relatives in some of these other states. I think we ought to encourage our relatives to also speak up to some of their constituents ought to speak up in other states, because I think that's where they're really hearing a lot, and they need to hear a lot to move them.
I agree with you. How many other people agree? Maybe we should do that. I've been calling my congressman to the point they know who I am now. I've met him before, but I don't think they like me, but I don't really care for him that much. That's the way it goes. But anyway, we got a challenge ahead of us. Are there any other questions? Cool.
With the need for the facelift, what's preventing the Park Service from creating more trash receptacles to help out with that, to make it more available and accessible?
Yeah, why is there a need for facelift, basically? For one, it's a really big park. A lot of trash is unintentional, I would say. You open your car, it's windy, something blows out and it goes flying away. Some is intentional. But also, think about it, you're coming into the park. The biggest problem with it is you got these long lines, right? And you're in the cars and you passed up the last bathroom and you're like going, oh crap, it's an hour to the gate, or it's an hour to get into the campground or to a bathroom. And so people get out of the car and do things. So a lot of it's toilet paper everywhere, but there's other things unintentional, and then there's people that actually do litter. And so I don't think, no matter how many trash receptacles you have, there is always going to be some trash. It's a lot less. I will say, since the amounts of trash we're getting, we're doing more projects for the Park Service. So that might be getting rid of threaded trails through the meadows. We've done a lot of that. We've done trail building. We've removed several thousand cedar trees out of El Cap Meadow that were encroaching on the oak trees. We pick seeds, we plant seeds. We do a lot of projects for the Park Service that they don't have the funding for, and we help them out. And I'll tell you, when you go out and volunteer in your park, it actually feels like your park for once. And until you go out and volunteer, you know, they tell us it's our park, but it's not until you're doing something there and you got people thanking you and you're all working together and the Park Service is thanking you and the superintendent. I mean, it's a wonderful feeling. And so at least that week alone, I feel like it is our park. Any other questions? Way in the back.
Ken, you look really good for 40. Can you talk a little bit about climbing as you age?
Well, I'm trying to climb as often as possible so I don't age. I just turned 66, so I've been climbing 54 years. I climbed yesterday at the gym, the day before at the gym, 2 days before that. I led 30 routes at a climbing gym in Fresno, like 5'10", 5'11". So I'm climbing pretty well and often. And I'm going climbing the next 2 days in Sonora. So I climb pretty frequently, and I'm able to kind of do the work I do with phone calls and also climbing with people that I network with. So I hope I'll never give it up. I'm going to do it till the end of my life, as far as I know, unless my physical capabilities decline. But so far, so good. I've had 9 surgeries. My neck's fused, had my shoulder rebuilt, both those in the same year, about 6 years ago, and I've been climbing hard ever since, harder and harder. And yeah, it's every bit as fun as it was the very first day I did it. How many people can say that? One more over here.
What is your advice to the next generation of climbers?
I think, what's the advice to the next generation of climbers? Mine is a few things. Believe in yourself, learn some history, and have fun climbing.
I'm familiar with the 60s when you drove into the stone. How do you do it now where you don't damage the rock? I mean, what are you using? Can you explain that?
Sure, I'll try to do it without visuals. I got to do this, but I can do it. In 1971, we had two kinds of hand-placed gear. One were wedges, sort of, and you'd put them in constrictions in the cracks. They get big and wide, and so you can put it in a wide spot and slot it down. Your biggest fear is the ground, right? Or, you don't want to fall. So most of this gear is set for a downward pull. That makes sense? And the other type of gear we had was basically a hex-shaped piece of gear, which gave you a couple different crack sizes. Stuff was very hard to place. And then in 1978, Ray Jardine came up with a piece of gear which looked like a syringe with a little spring-loaded umbrella with cams on it, and they were made for parallel cracks. What I mean by parallel crack, imagine 2 buildings separated by 2 inches, and so if you have wedge-type gear, it's just going to slide down or be really hard to put in. And so these cams revolutionized climbing in 1978, 79 was when I got my first set of them. And that's what we use to this day, and now this equipment's gotten better and better, and it works really well. Most people aren't using pitons, and we very rarely use them. And the ones we use now are called bird beaks, which are kind of like a hook shaped thing that goes inside the crack, and a lot of them you can hand place without a hammer, and they work pretty good. So unless you're doing the harder stuff, we pretty much don't use pitons anymore. You are allowed to use pitons, there's no restrictions. But climbers are pretty good about, 99.9%, it only takes one. But, it's real important that this rock is preserved for the future and the parks are for the future. And so that's where history kind of comes in play, that we realized we were damaging the rock, and pretty much everybody collectively elected to switch to this new type of gear, and thank goodness we did, because we stopped doing so much damage on the rock. Any other questions? And by the way, if some of you are shy or whatever, I'll be around if you want to ask a one-on-one or a personal one.
I've heard that it's easier for kids or someone who's lighter to start climbing because their strength to mass ratio is higher. And then as they grow and they get heavier, they have to rely more on their technique. Did you experience any difference when you got heavier or
Oh. Well, I do have a good reach. The question is, more or less based on body size, like kids or very fit. Gymnasts do really well at climbing. And she's asking, if you're heavier or bigger, if your technique has to be better. Well, yes. But I would say that anybody needs to learn good technique. And now if you're really strong, you're just going to, with good technique, climb harder stuff. But climbing's kind of cool in that way. We can all get the same feeling. And I actually found that women started better. It's a lot like climbing a ladder, unless it's overhanging or steep, but you're not going to do that at the beginning. And so you have to stand on your feet. It's like climbing a ladder. You're climbing your feet, using your hands for balance, standing over your feet. If you lean in the wall, your feet are going to slip. So you got to have that technique anyway to get up a lot of Yosemite climbs and stuff. So that's kind of one of the first things that you do learn climbing there, and that I taught there, was how to use your feet, and then suddenly people climb pretty well. I used to separate the couples sometimes because the guys would be pretty pissed off when their wives or girlfriends out climb them. And so anyway, I had little tricks, but it was kind of amusing, actually. But when I started, I couldn't do a pull-up or anything. I was weak, but I got to be really good on my feet, and I still am, and stuff. I'm very careful on my feet. So any other questions? Yeah.
Since you mentioned hip belay a couple times, and I think a lot of us in the audience probably have never experienced that, and I'm just curious what that feels like and how you survived hip belaying. But what it feels like to catch somebody and just give us that mental image so we can imagine it.
Yeah, I was pretty lucky. I never had to hold a big fall. Fortunately, I was usually leading. People held me. I know of several big falls like that. In particular, Mike Corbett and my friend Rick Kashner one time climbed, I think it was the direct route on Half Dome, and Rick took a 120-footer on a hip belay, and Mike's hands were blistered. He couldn't climb after, he could barely. And they made it to the top. I think it was the first one-day ascent of it, and quite an adventure. There's a lot of people that kind of had those problems. I was fortunate. There were times where I'm pretty lucky, especially when I was 12, 13 years old, because I was belaying people that are 220, 240 pounds, and yeah, probably would have yanked me right through the carabiner, I'm sure. That's what it felt like. Any other questions? Oh, we've got one more.
Awesome. In all your experience climbing with so many different people, what makes for a good climbing partner?
Yeah, what's a good climbing partner? Most important climbing partner is one that's not going to freak out when something goes wrong. As a climbing guide, I guided El Cap a lot, and I would test them beforehand. I learned after one mistake, trusting what they were telling me. I would try to scare them a little bit and see how they react. If there's somebody that just starts doing stuff, panicking and doing stuff without thinking about it, that's a dangerous person to be up there with. But if they're there, I can teach anybody anything, and if they can stay calm under a situation where some people might panic, that's a good climbing partner. I will say that every big wall I ever did, I either was best of friends with them afterwards, or we never wanted to talk to each other again. So it's one or the other. It's true. Got one more. I'm having fun. I hope you guys are.
What's your favorite route, and which is the one that you never did that you wish you had?
Wow, that's tough. I have a hard time picking a favorite route. I have memorable routes. Generally the ones I was the most scared of. I'll talk about one experience. I did a route called Eagles Way with Cade Lloyd, and hot summer day, we got up, and to this one point where you're kind of under where Horsetail Falls goes, and it was dry. And it started storming and raining really heavy, and the waterfall completely engulfed us. So I thought I was going to drown. It was his pitch to climb, and he climbed diagonal. The route goes diagonals left. So I was there belaying, watching this waterfall behind us, getting closer and closer, because water tension kind of travels down the wall, and it drips, and then the waterfall moves in. So it started out maybe 20 feet back, and by the time I got out from underneath it, it was hitting me, and I could stick my arm in it. It was terrifying. So I thought I was going to drown. So that's probably one of my more memorable climbs. But also the south face of Half Dome is memorable for me because that was 13 days worth of work. And I was so scared that, and I made it, and then it didn't get done for 37 years. So I was kind of waiting for somebody to do it to see what they thought. And they didn't. And apparently it's a really good route. I knew that, but I wanted somebody to do it, but I don't want anybody to die on it. It was a dangerous route, and now it's got more bolts, and so it's a lot safer now. But I'm hoping more people will do it. Let's see, other memorable routes. Those are probably the two most memorable, but I have favorite climbs everywhere. I have favorite boulder problems, favorite El Cap routes, favorite just routes too. I like Pat and Jack Pinnacle. I love it. Take friends out there that hardly ever climbed, and it's easy climbing, but I enjoy the heck out of it. Quite honestly, if it's good climbing, it doesn't matter to me what I do. I like it all. Any others?
I think we have time for one more question.
All right. Okay, this is the last one. She asked one. Anybody else have one? Last. Okay.
How did your family deal with you climbing? Did they live lives of anxiety and fear? Or, I mean, it would affect the people around you that you lived a kind of a dangerous life.
Yeah, I never really asked them, but if you all heard that. Yeah, I imagine they were a little scared of it, but I think I was the kind of kid that would disappear when I was young. I mean, they already knew where I was headed. I mean, for example, I was 2 years old, lived in Berkeley. I disappeared for 3 or 4 hours on my little push bike. I went across a couple of avenues to the People's Park, I guess. And the neighbors, everybody was looking for me. I did this in Mexico, too, and I did it in Palm Springs. I mean, I did it frequently. I get intrigued by something. And so I think by the time I was that old, they kind of trusted me. I mean, I was already going up and doing climbing trips on my own, and I had a lot of adults that would climb with me, so I was somewhat responsible. So, yeah, I don't know. I imagine they were a little bit scared. I wasn't the best at keeping track with them or letting them know what was going on, because when I first moved up there, I was having so much fun, and my dad sent me this little postcard with check boxes, and it had a stamp, and he goes, check one, I'm having too much fun, or I'm hurt, or I don't have time to ride, or whatever. And I didn't even send it back. It was horrible. But now I'm a parent, so I deserve everything I get. So, yeah, I feel bad about that. But they kind of knew. The 3 professors understood because I was passionate about it, and they had their own passions. And so that's the way it happened. I don't know. I'll have to ask my mom about that. I'll ask her tomorrow. But if you guys have more questions, I'd be glad to answer them over here. Thank you very much.